Hello everyone. We would like to quickly add this message before the episode begins. This is a disclaimer video. We would like to state that this particular episode was shot and recorded before the unfortunate and tragic voting incident. This is why you will hear no mention of the incident throughout the entire episode. We would like to express our solidarity with the people of Nagaland and the Konyak brothers and sisters in particular. We continue to pray for peace and justice, and to end off on a positive note, we hope you enjoy the upcoming episode and also have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you.
Ever since I was a young and I was into rapping 20 years later and I'm still here yapping. Guess I got so much to say, so I'm trying to educate all of us. I hope together we can elevate. Time flies and our life is moving so fast. What's the forecast? Good vibes to be broadcast. So come and chill with me as we let the bad vibes blow past. This is Shout Out Podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Shoutout Podcast. Before we begin, I would like to just make a few announcements. As you can see, we're at a different location today. This is actually the first time that we're shooting away from our usual location back in DIMAPUR. And that's because we have a special guest and a special episode lined up for you. Also, this is going to be the one-off for December. This episode is going to be the one and only special edition episode for December, so I'm really sure that you guys are going to enjoy this, but we will resume our episodes from January next year, so please look out for that. And like I said, one-off. So my message to everyone, just hope you have a great festive season with friends and family and enjoy responsibly. Now, like I said, many of you, I'm assuming almost all of you will know who he is, but nonetheless, let me just give a brief introduction. One of the most dynamic and visionaries that we have in the political scene, not just in our state, but in the nation. Besides that, he is a very highly acclaimed author and poet, and definitely an intellectual and someone with whom it is always a pleasure to hold a conversation with. He is none other than the advisor for IT and communications, NRE, and science and tech for the Government of Nagaland. Welcome to the show, Sir Mmhonlümo Kikon.
Thank you. It's a privilege and I'm honored to be part of this conversation.
Right. The honor is all mine, sir. Before we begin, I just like to start by sincerely thanking you for, blessing us with your presence and giving us your time. I know how busy your schedule is. So when you did say that, you were hesitantly agreed to come on the show, I was really humbled and excited for it. So thank you so much for that. Let's start with the pandemic. I had two-part sort of question. Initially, first is I just want to know, and it'd be nice to hear you share about your personal experience with how the pandemic was for you. We're reaching on almost 2 years of it now. And secondly, in your professional capacity, as we know, after the Tuensang returnee episode, a high-powered committee was formed, and you were appointed as the spokesperson for the Government of Nagaland. So in both roles, how was it for you personally and also professionally? How was it?
The pandemic is a global in nature. Everybody knows that, and the impact has been across the world.
Correct.
And the entire humanity has been grappling with it. And initially when it began, the response right from where it started to our country as well has been to lock down the states, and that has been the initial response. And so also in India, when the lockdown happened, so a lot of activities stopped.
Yes.
And the only activity was the entire government trying to protect its citizens from the spread of COVID.
Correct.
Initially, there were a lot of awareness campaign, especially to take precautionary measures.
Right.
And we have seen that washing your hands, sanitizing, and wearing masks
Yes.
has become, normal thing to do now.
Yes.
And in response to COVID-19 pandemic, that has been the initial protection, which I think all the governments, including community organizations, church organizations, all religious organizations participated in spreading that awareness.
Much needed, yes.
Much needed awareness. So initially, personally, the lockdown happened, and I was not focused more on ensuring that the health facilities in my constituency was up to the mark.
Okay.
So I had traveled occasionally to my constituency to monitor and also work with the district administration and the health and family welfare department personals to ensure that we comply with whatever SOPs were issued at that point of time. So that was the initial reaction as a legislator.
Okay.
Personally, the fact that we got a lot of time to spend at home with our families.
Right.
So I sort of appreciated and started valuing things we took for granted.
The small things.
The
right?
small
Yes.
things, yeah. So I spent a lot of time with my family. Also, personally, because I wanted to achieve certain targets, even during lockdown, it helped me in maintaining a good health, because we knew that we had to remain within the confines of our house.
Right.
So I was focused on ensuring that both diet and exercise was part of my daily routine. And I spent a lot of time with my kids, helping them with their homeworks, which got us closer. And I mean, it sort of opened a lot of vista for me. I learned a lot from my interaction with my kids. And then amusingly enough, I also know the kind of music they listen to. So it indeed exposed me to a lot of new music,
sounds.
new songs. So after the Tuinsang returnee episode,
Yes.
government was trying all its best to face the challenges of COVID.
Right.
And therefore, in order to ensure that we have better communication with our citizens, and we have a dedicated committee headed by the chief minister itself. And that was necessary at that point of time.
Right.
Because the kind of leadership we wanted to demonstrate was visible because of that decision. And in terms of communicating with the people on the various policies, SOPs, and safety measures that we needed to take, was communicated through the platform that I got along with my senior colleague Niba Kronu. And if you remember, we didn't have the COVID vaccine then.
Right.
The entire scientific community was trying to come up with a COVID vaccine as soon as possible.
Right.
And trials were underway. And as you already know, our Prime Minister had put a task force in place.
Yes.
So in line with that, the state government had to tackle this issue. And it had exposed the lack of health infrastructure to deal with a pandemic.
Yes.
So definitely it sort of at one end ensured that we were first understanding the challenges, addressing it as best as we can. And on the other hand, because this is a global pandemic, we were also looking forward to the efforts of the global community to come up with solutions like the vaccine.
Right. I remember when this was first happening and the pandemic was just all hell was breaking loose. And, government as usual always gets a lot of criticism. And I was just saying that although, yes, it had exposed our lack of infrastructure in the, medical department, this was something that brought down even the most advanced countries to their knees, the US and Italy and whichever other, major countries. So this was a lot to take for a small, tiny state like ours. But just to ask you, how do you think Nagaland performs state-wise compared to our neighbors Northeast in the management of the COVID?
So before I answer that,
Yeah.
let me get to the first part
Okay.
of what you mentioned just now.
Right.
So it's a global issue.
Right.
It has challenged humanity itself.
Exactly.
And how we dealt with it has to, as you have rightly pointed out, necessarily be compared with how states across the world tackled it. Some were affected badly, some were not so badly. But if you look at the numbers, you would see that the death rate is one of the parameters in which we measure how countries have tackled it.
Right.
And the other standard of measurement is the positivity rate. So these are the two measurements with which we look into how every state or any state has tackled the pandemic.
Correct.
So compared to the rest of the country, Nagaland had the strictest quarantine rules in the country.
That's great to know.
And we also had a very active community which wanted to raise and voice their opinions on the various challenges each district faced with regards to the COVID-19. So it was in a way an outcry, but it was also something which was positive because we could assess what was needed.
Right.
We could also ascertain and accept the pressures of the civil society. And governance is all about that. Governance is about being sensitive to people's voices. The only two aspects which not only Nagaland but the whole world faced was that because of the lockdowns, there was an increased activity of online engagement by its citizens.
Right.
So you would know that anybody with some data in their hand, data in the sense of the net package,
Yes.
and also the internet access or the mobile internet access would raise any issue and amplify their voices, and sometimes it could lead to misinformation.
Right.
So the only challenge was handling that. But over a period of time, we were able to communicate with our people when the panic turned to concern, and concern was later on, transformed into a sense of responsibility. It did take some time. It did take the government, some time to actually address the noises, both necessary and sometimes extraneous. But I think every government had to deal with that. It is not just Nagaland government. And as you have rightly pointed out, the fact that even the world with world-class health facilities
Exactly.
could not contain the spread of the virus and also the devastation caused by the virus. It speaks volumes of how a small state like us, with limited infrastructural support, to have actually contained it with certain strict rules and excellent cooperation by the people, in spite of one or two outcries.
Right.
We've been able to manage that. I think as any government would have faced at a point of time. I think fear, panic are some of the reasons why people just go, berserk. So it's understandable. So to allay their fears,
Right.
government had taken proper measures, and not just in communicating, but also in ensuring that health infrastructures and the facilities to challenge. In fact, the initial problem was that we didn't have testing facilities in Nagaland.
Right.
So even to get that, we got that in and set it up in record time. So whereas we were not testing anybody here, within 3 months we are testing more than 1,000 people per day, and we have 3 BSL lab.
Yes.
So it's an achievement of
Yes.
some sorts, and I'm very happy with the outcome.
It is definitely. We will get into a lot of things we have a lot of things to talk about.
Of course.
And like I said, thank you for your time, because our episode, as you know, I mean, our podcast, as you know, is a little on the longer side.
Yes.
And before we get into some different topics, I want to do the shout out. I've told you what this is, the shout out. So I'll just give a shout out, and after that you can give 1-2 shout outs of your own as well.
Sure.
Okay. So for this episode of the shout out podcast, my shout out goes out to no specific business, person, organization, nothing, just to the Nagas in general. I'm always a positive guy, but now being the festive season and December, I just want to give a shout out to all the Nagas. I hope everyone's doing good, and hope you finish off the year in a very strong and positive note, regardless of if you have had a good 11 or bad 11 months, past 11 months. Hope you can finish strong and enjoy this time with your friends and family responsibly. That's my shout out.
Nice. So my shout out is first to the frontline workers of the medical department, all the health workers who have given their life and also their effort in ensuring that we come out of this pandemic, and also who are right now currently working hours to ensure that the vaccination rate is increased in the state of Nagaland.
Right.
For that is the only way we can overcome this pandemic.
I think it's still like people have, I won't say it's gone back to normal, as they call it, the new normal, but it's still very important to do the basics, the wearing your mask when you're out, washing your hands, sanitizing, all that. So yes, I think especially during a time like this, with the expected extra inflow of tourists and other people, it's very important to keep that in mind. Sir, we're going to take it back to your childhood because, as I said earlier, I'm sure everyone knows who you are, but that's, Mr. Mmhonlümo, the politician, right?
Yeah.
I think it'd be very interesting if you can just take us back and just share with us how your childhood was like, your upbringing, maybe your experience in school, where all you studied, if you know.
So I still remember, cherish with much fondness those moments of my childhood life. I was born and grew up in KOHIMA,
Okay.
in a place called Bayava Hill.
Yes.
I'm sure you know about
Yes.
it. And I went to Don Bosco School, KOHIMA. So I'm a Bosconian true and true. I love my school, and even till date, I think among all the WhatsApp group of which I'm part of, the Don Bosco, class 10 batch of ours is the only WhatsApp group I'm actively participating in regularly. So that's the school part, and it was a fun part because we were exposed to not just the school, the syllabus, but a lot of extracurriculars were part of our, educational diet, if I may call it that. And later on, I went to Science College for my 11th, 12th.
Okay.
And then I went off to Delhi for my BA and MA in Delhi University. So I've had a fair mix of both, the local education at KOHIMA, and also, education in a big city like Delhi.
Right.
Just wanted to recall only one thing. When I went to Delhi for the first time, I was going out of Northeast for the first time in my life. So I saw a lot of tall buildings, big houses, and it was huge. So in a way, as I transitioned from Nagaland to Delhi, I went into a cultural shock, and it started me on a journey which I really appreciate today. There was an elderly person who told me that there is a difference between swimming in a river and swimming in an ocean. So
Definitely.
That is something I always carry with me.
Just rewind a little back to sort of your just before you went off to college and you were now becoming mature. You were maybe the 11th, 12th area. I always like to ask my guests this. You're still young, but you're sort of now an adult, And what were some of the things that were going on in your head regarding, what you wanted to do with life as a career? What were some of the things that you were thinking about back then?
In my ninth standard, I had written during one of our recess period a very short story.
Okay.
And like all short stories, it was fictional. It was somehow something which I had not really thought about. But in the midst of my writing, the story came out good. And I had shown it to some of my friends, and they said, it's very good writing. You should go and you should pursue a career in writing. So from then on, although I was equally interested in mathematics, I did pursue my passion for writing, and I decided that I will grow up one day and become a writer. Okay. So that was the, when you're young, everyone's asked what you want to become when you grow up. So every time someone asked me that, it was very clear that I wanted to become a writer.
That is quite early on, ninth standard. I mean,
yes.
To have that. So we're going to get to that part of it later. Yes. As you can see, Slingstones is everywhere, but we'll save that the best for the last towards the end. So two parts that I really want to go deep into and in conversation with is one is obviously your political career, and then the second aspect of it is the poet in you and your career as a poet also, if I may call it like that. Before we get there, I want to just touch on a few things quickly, because there were a few things that you were doing before you actually entered active politics. So you had told me that you worked as in Katha Publications, with Katha Publications. You had a brief career there as a writer / columnist kind of thing. So if you can just share with us how that experience was when you were there in Delhi.
So when I went to Delhi, I had a very clear objective in mind. I would do a BA in English literature, although I was doing my 11-12 in Science College. And I would read up a lot of novels written by Nobel Prize winners for literature. And it had an impact on me, a deep impact. And when I went to Delhi, I was very focused. I wanted to study English literature. At the end of my studies, I wanted to write books. It was very simple.
That was very it was
very
set.
And I was surprisingly very confident. And if I look back, I felt that I was a lot idealistic then and ambitious. And but I was irritatingly single-minded towards achieving that goal. So although I was actively involved in student activities, taking up the role of leadership in various organizations, and also because, like every one of us, I loved playing football.
Right.
So early on, I played for every team that will take me in their club, and when I went to Delhi also, I played for college, and therefore there were only 3 activities that really took my time. One, reading, and in my BA I was very ambitious. I have said this in other interviews also. At least till my MA, for 5 years, my target was to read more than 200 books in a year. I mean, it varied from year to year.
Right.
Some, at least about 2 years I could achieve. Some I couldn't, but of course the attempt was worthwhile. And when I had free time, I would, of course, football is also a discipline like any other.
Right.
So you would get up and you would practice for 2 hours every day. So it took care of my health. I was kept fit by that.
And how good were you, sir? Like with football, honest rating of yourself. How?
I mean, with coaching that I received in my BA, I was not so bad in the sense that I played active role in many of the victories that we've had as college, and my forte was my running and stamina.
What position do you play? Just
I was a midfield striker.
Okay.
So I usually either ensure that the striker gets into a situation where he can strike, or I strike myself. So, football is fun. Every game is fun. Every game you enjoy. And whether you play good or bad, if you give your best,
exactly,
you thoroughly enjoy.
Just for those who don't know, I mean, college level in a place like Delhi, getting into the college team it's not an easy feat by no means, right? Like a basketball, football team, whatever it may be. So I'm sure you're just being modest when you say that. You must have been a little better than that when you say just half decent.
No, I was not maybe interested in playing for clubs because then the training would have been far more rigorous than the training I received.
Definitely, yes.
But I feel that the training that we received and the coaching that we received was rigorous enough. So, college would ensure that you train in the morning, and morning would be like 7, 8. We play till 9 and then, for another 2 hours perhaps. And we get lunch free, of course, in the college. So that was also an added advantage for me.
And it's nice to see I've seen pictures or videos of you regularly playing in some exhibition match here and there. So it's nice that you do. I feel like I'm someone who's very like a big advocate for sports, starting all the way from a child's early age and how it should be ingrained into their system, using sports in a positive manner, because there's so many things we can do from sports. So I just want to say it's really nice to see someone who's if not regularly and like as a career obviously, but to use it for all its positive purposes.
Yes.
Besides that, you also were working with DICE. You had just take us through this for those that don't know. Please explain DICE to us, how you founded it or co-founded it, DICE.
So after my 8 months stint with Katha publication,
right,
and in that I had the role of promoting management through fiction. That's a program that we did with management students and or even companies, where you have possible future managers of companies or existing sitting managers run through literature with social concern, and that will marry their business outlook with a social outlook. So they would be exposed to literature where social issues are mainly the stories that we discuss.
Right.
So it was a very good program. After that, and also maybe because of that, I got exposed to a lot of literature from the various parts of the country, not just the English writing, but the regional language writers.
Okay.
And I realized that India has a very rich regional language writers and authors and a body of work that would inspire us anytime. And it led me to further work with organizations which were working on civil liberties, environmental justice, and therefore I decided that I had to take a call. And I attended a lot of workshops before I took a call. So in terms of advocating any issue, there's so many people across the world advocating issues of their people, of their communities. So I felt that I should also come back, work with our people on the trainings that I received later on, on ensuring that people are empowered. And I wanted to essentially come and start a policy, organization, which would also work with, people at the grassroots. So I came back and from Delhi, started going back to my district and those areas which I've heard since I was a kid.
Right.
Especially the Doyang Hydro project. Then in my constituency, the oil exploration site at Champang.
Yes.
So these were areas of concern for me. While working with people there, I also realized that we need not only document and produce a body of work on those issues, but we realized that livelihood at the grassroots level Especially my work was focused on rural women livelihood and leadership. So that was something I realized later on. So, it caught on. I decided that we should have an organization which addresses both the environmental policy and also rural livelihood.
And this was DICE.
This became DICE. Yeah.
And this was founded by you along with other people, or you were the...
I founded it, but I will not say that I was alone. There were a lot of people who informed me, educated me, participated in that and supported us. And I think it became what it is at that point of time because of all that coordination and cooperation.
Which year would this have been, roughly around?
This is the conception and the discussion with my friends in other parts of Northeast on how to set up something like that in Nagaland. Was around the time of 2005 December. So 2006 January we had already registered as a body. So ours is not a big organization per se, but we wanted to empower communities, build local leadership. So my focus was only on two very specific things. That the leadership that I built would be exposed to various areas and regions in the world where similar issues are happening. So I wanted to build a community based leadership, which also will align with knowledge-based leadership. So when you create that leadership, then the community is immediately transformed because you have a school of young leaders who would take up challenges at every sector. Both at the student union, parent body, the women organizations, the church leadership. So it was in a way, platform where we could train them. And that was what I was aiming at. We didn't want to take credit in the form of writing a report saying that DICE Foundation has done this activity, that activity. But I was looking more towards the future.
Creating future leaders.
Exactly. And it worked. Now, whenever I go to those areas, I don't need to speak or talk about those issues. Once the idea is shared, once the training is imparted, the local leadership takes up the leadership. And that's more empowering. And then that has happened. And I think looking back at DICE and what it meant to me especially is that it was able to do that. And build leaders at the local level who would help the community.
This is, you said roughly around 2005 and 2006 you set up. So I just want to know if there was the future plan, was that in your head that you were getting into politics by that time, or was this strictly just you were...
So that's a very difficult question, and I keep reflecting on that question myself. So the initial participation, and it was very active participation that I undertook in those areas, exposed me to a lot of issues, including issues of governance, issues of development. And how our communities at the village looks at self-determination or even, the future of their village, of their children and of their region. So these are ideas that we immediately get into, when we converse with them. These are discussions we have every day over tea, over food, and with the villagers. So the thing is, as somebody who reads and who gets exposed to various ideas espoused by various thinkers. If you are not sensitive to the readings that you do, then I think your reading is super, flush. It's in a way superficial. So for me, I feel that I am somebody who gets affected by what I read. And who learns from every book that I read, and also from every people that I meet. So I'm like any one of us, a student for life. And when I met these people and their issues, there was always this urge to champion their causes,
Right.
to ensure that we correct the wrongs that we see. And I was looking at what is the best possible way to do that. Although I aspired to write and I was writing and I was reading a lot, I felt that the best possible platform for someone in a small state like Nagaland is politics. I didn't call it politics then. It was, getting into the legislative assembly.
Right.
So I decided that if our voices have to be heard, I should join the electoral process. Otherwise, I was never interested. I would say never. I would say I was also never exposed to this kind of. I was in student level politics, but it didn't really strike my mind
That you would get into
politics, electoral politics.
electoral politics.
So, but when you go down, meet with people, look at their issues, listen to them, then it strikes you that the only way for any sensitive person to respond positively is to find ways to help them. How do we help them?
It is to get into.
Exactly. I mean, for a position, the maximum impact any position can have today is the legislative assembly.
Definitely.
Especially
At
for a
least in a
state like Nagaland.
Yes, yes, for our state, yes. So this makes a perfect segue into what we're going to get into, which is the politics. As many know, you are one of the young leaders, yet so experienced. You have 3 elections under your belt, as in you fought 3 elections under your belt. 2 you won. The first one was the one that you lost, and this was in 2008, if I'm not mistaken. 2008. I want to just get your story on how the process was being your debut election, and also how the loss affected you. Like how did it help you, motivate you for the future? What were some of the things you learned with your first defeat, the first electoral process of your career?
So I would like to disagree with you on the use of the word lost.
Okay.
I didn't win.
Enough. Yes.
I didn't win, but I didn't lose.
Okay.
Because no university in the world would have given me the education I had got after my first election. What happens is I realized that like any other Naga growing up in urban centers, KOHIMA, DIMAPUR, or any of the towns, and because our parents are working in government jobs, and we had secure salary, and us growing up in a place where we mingle with all the possible tribes from Nagaland and even communities from outside.
Yes.
We are an entitled lot. We think that we deserve a lot of things, without working hard. And I, for one, was someone like that. I thought that, when I contested, because I had concern for the people will identify that. Also, in my first election, it was a period where, when I went down to the villages, I didn't know anybody. Nobody knew me.
Right.
So I had to do a lot of baseline survey. I had to know every household. So, and my constituency, one of the largest constituencies in Nagaland, it's more than 70 villages. And so it's not easy to cover that.
Of course.
And there, at that point of time, there were many areas where it was not accessible by jeepable, motorable roads. So it was not easy. And I learned the hard way, about how our people think. And when I say our people, it's not the urban dwellers alone. At least 70% of our population are the farming community.
Correct.
And my electorate, because it's a rural electorate, it's also a different set of electorate. So when I go and meet and discuss with all of them. So I look into their history, I look into their, livelihood, current status, and all of those that I looked into made me realize after the election that I needed to learn a lot of things. I needed to communicate and connect with them about why I am contesting. I needed to tell them that I am different from the rest of the candidates. So obviously everyone does that, but in my case, it was not a loss because I gained a lot in terms of experience, in terms of acceptance. As much as I wanted people to accept me, I had also to ensure that I have to humble myself. I had to be accepting of everybody, with the idiosyncrasies and eccentricities that are, in abundance in our place. We have to understand where people come from and where they are placed economically, politically, and also look at the pattern of voting. So these were factors I learned only after the first election. So although I didn't win the elections, I got a decent second out of 7 or 8 of us.
That's a lot of candidates. For one
of candidates. One of the reasons why Wokha district has many candidates because we have equally high number of population, but we have less constituencies.
Yes, assembly seats, right.
Because of certain historical mistakes in the past, and definitely for a population which is high and with a very low constituency, you would expect because there are so many dynamic people in every community,
right? Of course,
and they want challenges, they want opportunities, and when there is one opening, I think there will be many spines.
Exactly.
It's only natural.
Exactly.
So for my district, it is a very clear thing. But for my constituency, I had the good fortune of contesting with people who had been ministers and MLAs, and of course, as I say, the highlight of my, participation in that election in 2008 was that I was young. I was, a little arrogant, and I was thinking that people should vote for me. The sense of entitlement that
right. Just being a little naive, everything will just
And I'm. It's not just me. I feel that being young,
the youth in you.
So I felt that all those were demystified. I was brought down to earth.
After the results.
Yeah, after the results, and I think that learning has stayed with me.
So fair enough, you said it perfectly. There was not, you wouldn't like to call it a loss, but in fact you took so much from it after coming second. You moved on, and 2 elections later, you're still very young, sir, but you're a very seasoned leader. And why I say this is, for those that don't know, I'm sure most of them know, but for those that don't know, you, besides being a state leader in your role as advisor to the government in these departments, you also, with your role in the party, the BJP, you have been given the very high profile, designation of spokesperson, national spokesperson, if I'm not mistaken, the only one from the Northeast, entire Northeast.
And the only one with a Naga accent.
The only one with a Naga accent. So, and also in addition to that, you've been given in charge of a state which is Mizoram. I think they call it the Prabhari. Yes. So can you just share with us a little bit about you getting into these? I call it high profile, post or designations, which is now, we're not just looking, and I'm not just talking to a state level leader, but a national leader, like I said in the introduction also. So can you just touch on these 2 roles a little bit, as a spokesperson for the BJP and National Party, and also for being a state in charge?
When you put it, it's a little flattering, but definitely the responsibility is one of privilege. And I feel that the BJP is the only party which recognizes hardworking party workers from across the country. It's actually an example of how the leadership looks at identifying people who they can empower from every region. And it's also in line with the party's philosophy that every part of India you would have so many vibrant leaders. But unless you promote those leadership, the party will not grow. Just outside of party narrative, you would find that our Prime Minister frequently says that if India has to develop, Northeast must develop first. So that priority has been given. So from the entire region, when my name was announced as one of the national spokesperson, I was already a little tense for the fact that I have a lot of responsibilities in the state with my constituency, and this additional responsibility will allow me to travel everywhere, get the correct message across to people on behalf of the party. Therefore, responsibility of this nature was both a surprise and a pleasant surprise. But also it was a recognition of the fact that Northeast being one of the regions where BJP is in power in almost all the states. It is good that they have recognized somebody from Nagaland. For the first time in the history of Nagaland, some Nagas are getting responsibilities at the national level of any political, especially a national political party. So it is not just my representation or participation or my appointment alone that matters to me. It is the fact that they have recognized the Naga youth. They have recognized that we can be given responsibilities at the national level, and this happens only in the BJP.
There are quite a few things to discuss when it comes to politics. There are a few, I'm sure. This is something like, I think Naga people love discussing politics in their own, whatever capacity they are in. I, for one, also am very interested in it, and I love talking about it. So a few things that I want to touch on, because we have to talk about your book and your poetic side also. But
yes,
the electoral process. This is something that I've discussed with previous guests that have come on the episode, and your friend Hekani also talked about it, and we've talked about this with a lot of guests, and it is very openly known by everyone of how I like to call it the vicious cycle of the electoral process, and how it starts from everyone involved in the. It's like, what I like to say is everyone is to blame for this, and the way in the position we are right now when it comes to the electoral process. So now with you being 3 elections in and the 4th one just around the corner, you will have plenty of experience, and so just the overall experience in general, how would you like to address that, the electoral process, and why it is also one of the reasons I feel one of the biggest stumbling blocks for developments to come in our state?
It's a very big question.
I know it had to be us, sir, but that's
and
yes.
I know it's something I or no other politician from Nagaland would like to really openly discuss.
I'm sure,
but let me address some of those that you have raised, because it is our reality, and unless we address our reality, there is no future. So, as somebody who's interested in the future of the Naga people, the state of Nagaland, I constantly worry about the issues that you have raised. If we are to have a system which works for the people, then we'll have to be fair. And when I say fair, let me quote some people, and it may sound offensive, but truth is most times shocking to some, too many actually. When I would quote Uncle Niketu Iralu as a social worker and reformer, and thinker actually, he said that Nagaland or the Nagas suffer from tribal narcissism. What is tribal narcissism? It's the collective effort of a community or a particular tribe to gloat over certain advantages that they actually take against what is fair. Let me give you an example. So this is the pandemic, and we have the COVID-19 challenge, and now because our vaccination rate is very low, because the vaccine hesitancy is high, and of course there are other factors which leads to sometimes some data interpretation is not according to the actual
misconstrued.
So there are issues like that. However, the issue of physical medical infrastructure that people have raised time and over again is something which needs to be looked at from the policy making level.
Right.
When I say that, I would try to explain it in a very simplified manner. Number one, when Delhi sends any financial support for any program, it is based on data. So the data would mean population.
Right.
Data would mean for a state like Nagaland, geographical isolation. So when you are deciding on how many number of health centers, whether it is sub-center or a primary health center should be there in any state, any district.
Right.
It is based on the proposal sent by the Directorate of Health and Family Welfare.
Okay.
So what we have inherited is something which has been unfair, which is skewed, and therefore when you have a policy that you inherit, implement it wrongly, also because the policy was wrong, you tend to inherit all the problems of the past. And I'm talking about system. So I'll simplify that for you. There are some districts who have, because not every district has the same number of population.
Of course.
So there are districts which have a higher population ratio. So there is one or two districts who have a lower population, but has the highest number of primary health center per population. How did that happen? So if the criteria was population, say according to Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, it is maybe 10,000 or 20,000. Population should have one primary health center. Initially 20,000, but because of the lower population density, plus also the geographical isolation of some villages.
Right.
So those considered would enable one district to get a fair amount of primary health center being installed. So when you have a policy based on who your minister was, because
Previously,
the minister belonged to that district, and this is our past that we have inherited. And my challenge and the challenge of my generation and my contemporary in the legislative assembly is to ensure that we don't do such things. Is to ensure that we correct the wrongs. So unless we correct the wrongs, we will continue with the same system. There should be a primary health center in every conceivable place which fulfills the criteria. And the criteria is only two. And one is also because it's for Nagaland state. It's not something which is written, but it's understood.
Understood, right.
So then, how do you balance the development package or the assistance required by every, district? So this district has more primary health center. Every primary health center has to have an MO, medical officer. So when an MO is not placed, because medical officers are also limited, so they have to be placed in every district. So when the department places the medical officers, they have to place it according to the population, not according to the number of primary health centers you have. So your local leaders may complain that we have less doctors. But if you look at the population, policy has to be equal. So for equitable system of development to take place, such policy wrong policies needs to be corrected. So when you have a system like that you inherit, then it's very difficult. So for my first term, I had a huge problem. I realized that all HOD, AHOD, go through their jobs by writing an examination, competitive exam, whether NPAC or departmental exam.
Right.
So they must have written it in English. So when I write to the various departments for an issue that I hold there and for a policy which I feel it needs to be discussed and corrected. Then because I write in English and because they also know English, I feel that as a concerned officer or even a minister or advisor, they should read that properly and address it accordingly. But if you are not fair to the chair that you hold, then how can society develop? So there will always be inequality in Nagaland whenever that happens. So when you do take such decision in favor of your tribe, against and at the expense of other tribe and districts, that is tribal narcissism. That is where I want to come to. Because it is mostly, when people look from outside and people don't have the experience of contesting election, you would definitely want to talk about the occupational hazards. But we should focus on the institutional systemic discrimination that happens because of the existing wrong policies, if there are any. So those has to be addressed. Unless we address that, there will be no progress. We will continue with the same trend of electioneering, of governing. No matter how visionary or how capable you are, you cannot address change unless you change those policies.
The previous mistakes that were made. So that is one issue that you're very vocal about, which is
I'm irritatingly vocal about that.
Yeah. But I mean, it needs to be, being a leader, you have to be very vocal and persistent if you want the change to come. So highly underrepresented is what you feel your district is in regards to the number of assembly constituencies that we have. That is one of the main issues that you keep talking about, which I think that is something that if you ask majority of the Nagas, I think they will agree with you. If it's in personal, maybe if they don't have to do it publicly, they will agree with you that a district like Woka has 4 assembly seats, which is, if you look at, it doesn't take much maths to do to know that your district deserves more than just 4 seats. So another issue that I want to quickly touch on when it comes to politics is with the NLTP Act. This is another one of my favorite issues to keep bringing up, and I think if you know already that I'm one big proponent of lifting the act. It's very interesting because 2013, let me just check. 2013 Assembly, you're already an MLA, Parliamentary Secretary at that time?
No, I was just an MLA.
MLA at that time, excuse me. 2013 Assembly, at the 0-hour discussion, you had brought this up, the appeal to look into this act, whether it's to remove it or whatever the case may be, but to look into the act. And that led to a committee being formed on this issue. This was way back in 2013, right? So few things I just want you to touch on when you talk about this issue is that what prompted you back then in 2013, and coming all the way up to the recent just recently found out that the committee that was formed back in 2018, the current one that a lot of people are talking about because it came out in the news recently, where the chief secretary is heading a committee to look into the modalities of the NLTP Act and whether there's reason for partial prohibition lifting, I think is how they phrased it. So what prompted you back in 2013? What is your take on the current, the situation that we have, which I think by somewhere in December, they should be coming up with the report, some answers, their answers on this. And also where do you think the future lies for this act? I don't know if you can, how much of a personal or professional, response you can give to this, but whatever you can freely talk about.
First off, it's a very sensitive and of course interesting topic.
Yeah.
And it has sort of challenged a lot of leadership and the society itself into thinking about the pros and cons of lifting the prohibition that exists.
Right.
If you look at our history, I always keep saying this, that we have democratic institutions in place. But do we have democratic processes in place? Because institutions would be put in place by governments. But processes will be put in place by people.
Right.
So in a state like Nagaland, if you look at the history of NLTP Act, it was made in the assembly, but it was driven through a public process led by the Nagaland Baptist Church Council.
Right.
And also the Naga
Mothers Association. Right.
But if I remember correctly, the most vocal was the Nagaland Baptist Church Council. So it was at that point of time decided that this is required to put in place measures against various excesses of drinking and alcoholism. The narrative has changed over a period of years.
Definitely.
We know, and even in Murung Express article in 2014, I read that there are 500 illegal bars in DIMAPUR alone. So if you look at that, first off, illegal bars means that they are selling liquor. Secondly, the fact that NLTP Act is in place and it is in direct contradiction and contravention of that act.
Yes.
We are also wondering how it exists. It cannot exist without a certain nexus.
Definitely.
Then in today's time, we also hear of syndicates controlling, the illegal trade.
Right. The
Of
black
alcohol.
business of alcohol, yes.
Yeah.
The bootlegging.
In 2013, because I'm interested in policies for the state of Nagaland, especially to ensure enable development, I decided that I should raise this issue in the assembly because it's of public importance. And my primary interest was I represent a constituency which shares a long constituency with a long border with Assam.
Right.
And all the liquor comes from there. So even if there is prohibition, there is a problem of our citizens drinking a lot of spurious liquor. So a lot of my supporters who come to me for help for their health issues and treatment in the hospital are primarily people who have been affected by drinking spurious
Yes, consumption of
spurious
liquor.
So what happens is the cost of treatment is very high at the end of the day, and they'll usually go to the hospitals when all hope is lost, or at the last
stages,
last and late stage. So it's sad, disheartening, but it was a reality that forced me to raise that issue. That if we are to have prohibition in place, what regulations should we add more to the NLTP Act to ensure that we don't drink spurious liquor? Because you cannot stop the right of an individual to drink.
Right.
We are anyway having access to local brews. So of course it may not be as devastating as the spurious liquor, but there is still a flow of alcohol in the state. It's a fact.
Definitely.
It's a fact. I must acknowledge, just because of propriety of protocol of being politically correct, I cannot say that there is no flow of liquor in the state. There is. So we must acknowledge that truth. Unless we do that, we will not be able to discuss our reality. So I felt that by raising that issue in the assembly, the government should review the NLTP Act to ensure what works best for us and what works best for people who love alcohol. And there is a fair share of that in the state. So, when I raised that issue, there was a debate. On health grounds, on revenue grounds, Before prohibition, NLTP Act was put in place. Nagaland was earning around 60 crore per annum. This was like long time back. And 60 crore must have been huge. And after that, it was reduced to 10 lakhs. So if you look at the revenue aspect of it also, it's very important. So, a lot of revenue issues forces us to go to Delhi in search of funding. And we are not able to stand up on our own feet. Our economy is not able to thrive because of issues with regards, revenue.
Economic reasons. Yes,
Economic reasons, and it impacts a lot of our policies. It definitely impacts policies which affects you in your daily life. Let me not elaborate on that. But when it comes to prohibition, I think we need to review. And and it was very positive response. Our Honorable Chief Minister said we will have two committees, one to look into the scientific and health aspect of the impact of NLTP Act. The other was also to look at the legal aspects of it. But unfortunately, he went to Delhi as a Lok Sabha MP, and the matter died there. This term in 2018 later part, this issue was conveniently addressed by the formation of the committee which you talked about. So this committee is headed by the Chief Secretary. All comparisons with other states who have prohibition have been done. They have done a lot of technical studies. It took a lot of time. But due to pandemic, I think it has been postponed. The last and the most important part of it is, for the government to ensure that good governance is in place, we actively seek the opinion of our stakeholders, that is our citizens. And therefore, that part is remaining. So when the study is actually, compiled and we are ready by maybe next year, because the festive season has started today, people are no more to discuss.
Ironically,
exactly. So next year perhaps there will be a series of consultations. But personally, I feel that we use 2-3 arguments. One is like Bihar, how alcoholism impacts the citizenry. The other is as Christians, we have a different argument on alcohol and liquor. So when it was part of the directive policy of the Constitution to encourage prohibition, but only few states still have prohibition, and three of those states are in Northeast. So we see now that unless we review this policy, one, we will not be able to actively address the issue of alcoholism leading to health issues. And there are models in different states where prohibition has been lifted, but alcoholism have not gone up. So those datas are available. And then there are a lot of revenue which can help our education and health sector. Sometimes in a pandemic like this, we are running around for some financial aid. We got a lot of help from the center, thanks to our Prime Minister. But if we had our own revenue,
our own funds,
so we would have addressed this issue properly and in a timely manner. So the implication is huge.
Definitely.
The implication is huge. And definitely, I feel that as a Christian, we should also look to how, the Baptist part of Southern America address prohibition. There is no prohibition in the US.
Exactly, sir. So I like the way you touched on each aspect, because I'm not going to bore the audience again with my thing, but I've said this in the past many times. There's definitely financial implications. The amount of money that we could possibly be earning, the state government could be earning from its revenue from taxes or whatever it may be. The issue of the health factor, that even if you ban alcohol, the people who want to drink are still going to find a way to drink. You're only forcing them to now drink spurious liquor. So health factor is there. And the fact that, again, a mighty country like US failed to implement the prohibition properly, and they accepted that this was not the way to go. And like you just right now mentioned, how the Baptists there also, the ones who brought Christianity to us in the first place anyway, have been living with no prohibition in place for the longest time now. So I do feel, I think it's next month that they will be coming up with a report, right? So I'm very keenly interested in hearing what they have to say. And
hopefully, it might take some time, because it's a sensitive subject.
Right.
And in Nagaland, because the government is focused on good governance, and we want to take along all the stakeholders with us. It takes a little time for people to,
I'm sure.
Come to a consensus on
Yes.
any issue.
Yes, I'm just happy that very happy to find out that you addressed this issue way back in 2013, and that a committee has been in place since 2018. But because of the pandemic, it's taking time. But the fact that this conversation is happening, regardless of what happens in the future, whether the NLTP Act stays in place or not, I appreciate that these things are in motion and people are talking. And I think for us to progress, we need to have conversation. And like you said,
I should also appreciate that a lot of young preachers are coming up with, very interesting, intelligent response to this issue. The church is silent on this for now, but we want to church to address this, whether policing and active regulation works in the matter of alcoholism,
right,
and leading to further discussion and debate on prohibition. I think Naga society has been flooded with opinions on prohibition. It is time that the church also responds with their opinions on prohibition.
Right.
Because we are all part of the church.
Yes, we're one big family, so the elephant in the room has to be addressed, basically.
Exactly.
It has to be, yeah. You mentioned earlier that from the age of, when you were in 9th standard, that you were already focused on wanting to become a writer. I don't know if it's a poet back then, but basically a writer. And so it's been there with you for a long time. When and how, just share with us the journey on when you actually decided to make it into like a career of some sort, because now this is the 3rd book that you've published, right? So how did that, where did that push come from, that like I want to actually write a book instead of just being a writer, how do you call it, like a time pass, like as a hobby, you're just writing. What pushed you and what prompted you to actually start publishing books? And just take us on the journey before we actually get into the books itself.
So thank you for asking this question.
Right.
But let me start by, challenging one notion.
Okay.
That a writer can have many professions,
Okay.
and still be a writer. His career need not necessarily be that of a poet or a novelist.
Right.
And majority of writers don't earn enough, and a lot of them struggle to stay afloat as writers. So as a career, it's not really an attractive career.
Okay.
But as a reader, an avid reader, you always want and aspire to write and get published. So that is because you want your ideas to be shared and also discussed by people who read.
Right.
So this is one aspect which needs to be clarified, because as a career I never thought of being
As a writer. Okay. Got it.
writer.
Yes.
Unless of course you write a best-selling book and it sustains your life. So it happens to many, but
Not to
the majority.
Not to
let
the
me
majority,
say, yeah.
definitely.
So initially, when I started out, I wanted to be a short novelist.
Okay.
So I started writing short stories because that's how I understood writing. And one of my favorite writer, I keep saying this, William Faulkner, is a novelist. He said that the only way to learn how to write is to write. And therefore I started writing. So anything and everything. So I participated in essay contests, poetry writing. And poetry is particularly interesting because in our curriculum during our school, we had a lot of interesting poetries we read. I don't know the latest curriculum, but back then we read a lot of interesting poetry. And always, as a young person, you want to write poem, for a friend, for, somebody you admire, for... Right. Just for the sake of writing, you write. And because it's the easiest in the sense, in terms of it's
The
not
format
lengthy.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not lengthy. It's not the easiest, but it's not lengthy.
Definitely not easy.
And like every person sings in the every person is a bathroom singer. Every person writes poetry. So, but as a career, then there is the technicalities of it. There is the refinement that you need. So you study a lot of poetry because you're literally in love with language and words, and you want to be able to express yourself in the best possible way for any thought, any idea, any issue. So I felt that while writing stories, while writing my on other subjects, whenever I get a time, I should write poetry. So oddly enough, I stopped myself from wanting to publish.
Okay.
I wanted to just write. So I kept writing, and when my wife died, I thought before I forget our conversations, I should put it down in the form of poetry. So it was generally a conversation that we had, over a period of years.
Right.
And because when she fell ill, the doctors already pronounced that it's a rare disease and she's not going to live long. So we were discussing a lot of issues. So I had decided that I'll put it down and just publish it.
Okay.
So that it's kept as a memory. And when my daughters grow old, they will read it and they'll remember their mother from the poems that I wrote. It's a conversation.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and then I wanted to be honest to the thoughts shared by my wife, as honest as possible. And I had put down those in the form of a poetic conversation. So that's when I decided that I'll start publishing.
Okay.
So then I published the next poem, because now with the aid of new technology, it is easier for me. Because before, you carry a book around, you read, and then sometimes you have to sit down and read heavy books. You can't carry that when you're traveling so much. But for people like me who travels a lot, we have what is called blessings of Kindle. There is a problem and also the blessing. So I have downloaded Kindle in my smartphone, and I use that every time I want to read. So as soon as I get up, I read. Every moment I get, I read from the Kindle. So at least I can finish as many books I can. But it also allows us to write. So I have disciplined myself to write in my notes on my phone.
Right.
So every time I just write the draft. Then whenever I sit down in front of my laptop, and because it's in the iCloud, it's synced, so I can easily download and edit and rewrite. So it helps us at least in our first draft. So as a person interested in writing, the genre is not the I would say I'm not limited to one. Okay. And it's not a limitation. But then, as I said, poetry is something which I always go to because it's also not so lengthy. It's not like in the past where you write the entire Odyssey,
Yes.
And so it's much easier. But novels and other non-fictions takes a lot of time and a lot of research.
Yes.
So you just can't write one, easily. So you'll have to be serious, because you expect your readers who buy your books to enjoy reading your book.
Of course.
And you can't just take them for granted. Although they're not usually in my mind when I write, but when the output is there in the market, then it is for them to decide, So therefore, you need to do your homework well, and for which, now technology has provided us with a lot of tools to do that.
Right.
So it's much easier for writers now, I believe.
Coming to the book, along with you, I think this book is sharing the limelight with you on today's episode. But Slingstones, before we get into some of the poetry from the book, can you just tell us, how did this book come about? The inspirations or stuff like that.
It's I wouldn't say inspiration,
Okay.
but the challenge was, because having studied outside of Nagaland, all of us who have done that would understand that everywhere we go, because India is a country of so many different cultures,
Right.
so many different communities and identities. Whenever you meet a new person from a different culture, even among Northeasterners, you tend to discuss your culture, your
Yes,
background.
yes.
And everywhere you go, you're asked who you are, who are you, what is, which tribe are you, and we have all experienced in some parts of India, people are a little weak in geography. So
yes.
they know more about American geography than India's
Right,
geography.
right.
So it is important that our voices are heard. It is important that our stories are told. It's important that in any form or genre, our life or our culture, our tradition is articulated. And I felt that because I have been writing poems, I would want to write something which exemplifies what the Naga experience is. So I write about our culture meeting, Christianity. So when animism meets Christianity,
Right.
what happens? So instead of answering a general question like that, I wanted to express how we felt, what we went through as a Naga, and when Christian missionaries came. So there are certain issues like, in when you are outside of Nagaland, especially Northeast, and in the metros, you're sometimes faced with an unpleasant experience
Right.
of you cooking and somebody not liking it, because of the smell. So, but then here it's our culture. So how do you express that? So I have written something where I explain the cooking process, of the herbs that we use,
Right.
and the fact that we savor and relish that process itself before the eating of the food
Right.
that we cook. So it's articulation of all the processes of our culture, which explains what a Naga has gone through, from the exposure to various, cultures
Cultural
that we have
shock.
come across, and also in order to explain what ours is succinctly, we have to also place before the world what we think is ours. And that is something I attempted to do in this book, that this book of poems should, in its 70 odd poems, explain to people what we are.
What we are, who we are. Yes.
And if you do a reading of it, you would understand, the depth of our identity. So it's not so easy. It's complicated, complex.
It is.
But it is so because of the various historical periods that Nagas have gone through.
Right.
Oh.
I've had the last time we met, you gifted me the book, which
Yeah.
thank you so much for that again. And I've more or less completed, a few poems left, but I was very happy when you said, you wanted to promote this book, and I'm aware of the promotional sort of campaign that you did for the book. You've been out of state, you've been many places and promoting, and using our small platform, we're very happy to be doing our bit also to promote the book. And also, again, very happy when you said that you would want to recite one or two poems along with sort of breaking them down, because poetry, like you said, it might be it looks very simple, or people might feel like that, but it is very complex in its own way. And when we have the author himself here, who better to explain what this is about? So why don't you start, sir? Like, I'll give you the copy, or it's of the okay.
Yeah. So 2 poems I'll read.
You can break them down after reading one, or both.
I'll get to that later.
Okay.
So this is a poem called Listless Fear. And I'll get to the explaining later.
Okay.
Is dying the death of us? Do you whisper softly amidst growing shrieks? A ventilator sentence for life, as Siamese twin on you. Fears blow by as we see, we feel panic ridden. Or is it the long, listless wait? Is fear your only companion? Lasting confusion in panic so normal, in random in faith resurfacing? Is it now a disease? Send voices ashore as all seem wayward, unknown and rattled. The more we know, the more we fear. This is one. The next is something which I like, personal favorite. Sesame seed. Sesame seed retrieved from the cache for a somber occasion, crushed in a wooden pot with a handheld wooden pestle, regulating force with steady pressure as the water boils over the firewood. And the sooty aluminium pot receives the pulverized black seeds as it dissolves, like salt into the simmering pork. Red and soft with chili powder. Wiry pieces of dried bamboo shoot dancing with bubbles of hot water. The fire burning as more logs are shoved and flame rises up and the smoke dissipates. A relish, a taste, a delicacy, a recipe, all forged on fire, sprinkled with sesame seeds.
Very impressive, sir. I just want to say before you get into the breakdown, I had read both these poems also, and I do love poetry, but poetry can tend to be complex, and what the author is trying to convey sometimes can have multiple meanings also, and So, can we start with listless fear, and you can just sort of break it down for us?
So before I do that, I was saying that I need to please make this
announcements. Or?
No. I mean clarification. Let us say the poems, as you rightly say, is sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's difficult,
right?
And most times for literature students, you have to really read hard, and you put in a lot of words in one small poem because you want to be evocative. You want to actually take the reader back to the various sensations. Number one, number two, or the various thoughts that are related to a certain word. So these two poems are about, one is the entire psychology of fear. The other is a mechanical expression in the sense that it defines the process of cooking, but it privileges the sesame seed, which is part of our food culture. So the first poem, Listless Fear, that I read, is about the cycle of fear that permeates through an individual when it receives a lot of events, depending on the subjectivity. It defines how somebody is affected by one fear or the other. So it's a very general poem. But again, like I say, the reader appreciates any poetry depending on the present situation he is going through, depending on the evocation that these words and the scenes create in you. So it is not always the intended meaning that the poet wants to describe that reaches and influences and impacts the reader. So I always give space to that reception by the reader, which is not just one. It is not limited.
It's open for interpretation according to the different type of readers.
But ultimately, what is important is what you receive. So if you receive the process as something which is evocative of what you are, which is articulating your culture for you, and you find that if somebody asks you, what is Naga food? And you suddenly takes out this sesame seed and say, okay, read this first. Do you understand any of it? So this is just one aspect of our food. But this is how much we value it. Because it is part of our identity. Because it defines, who you are in a way, without actually, writing it down. So when I wrote Sesame Seed, it's about how I wanted to showcase and portray the Naga food culture. But then it's a poem.
Right.
And it has to have some specificities. So this specific sesame seed is representative of all the various items we use in our food, and our food is very popular these days in the entire country.
Yeah.
So it's something which actually tries to document that. So if you look at listless fear, I try to look at both past and present, and I'm using words which people can identify because of the excessive use of those words during a pandemic.
Right.
So it's because it's an attempt to get into the mind of the reader by opening the doors of the various emotions that they didn't maybe possibly think that they had or they were capable of having. So it's quite intense, but I would not say that I'm breaking it down. I'll just say I'm guiding you towards the reading of those poems.
Right. I'll just share my opinion. I mean, not
Please,
my opinion, sorry, but my sort of when I read poetry, I just look at, I try and find things that I feel like I can sort of identify from the poem. Might be the author is doing it intentionally, might be he's not even thinking about that. So from Listless Fear, I know it's not literal, but when you talk about death, and I sort of felt like when I read through this poem, it's about like obviously like you said, different fears of different things, and death being one of one of the things that many people fear, and how you were trying, but I felt like this was coming out to me, like how ignorance is sometimes bliss, and when a fool is in a world with so many things going on and he doesn't know about it, the burden of knowing all the problems and realities of such, sometimes ignorance can be a bliss. That's one thing from Listless Fear that I took away. And from Sesame Seed, when I read Sesame Seed, when I finished reading Sesame Seed, one thing that just stuck out for me, and one thing that I just got from it was that although there are many other things like the Sesame Seed, in this particular poem you were talking about the Sesame Seed. It's how about like the small things in life can be a big game changer. Like how we talked about in the beginning of the episode also, when you said it's the small things that sometimes we tend to forget, and how they can make such a big change. And so like a small thing like the sesame seed into a pot of a stew, the other main ingredients like the meat and all that will be and can be the big change, game changer. That's what I took away from it.
I would say it's quite a reprimand. Not to the poet, but to the politician. And why I say that, I'll tell you. Because, I mean, the only definite thing in a human being's life is your birth and your death. In between, when you are angry, and as a politician, I know this, when you are angry at anything, which you can't reason out, you usually think that you're going to live forever.
Right.
And of course, mental health issue is another issue. But in the state of Nagaland, there are a lot of fears. There are a lot of fears that I wanted to capture when I wrote this. I mean, I felt that when human beings are angry, they sort of forget their the cycle of their life. Sometimes it can be short, sometimes it can be long, and usually we are driven by fear, but it's always externalized, and as a poet, I can identify with that. As a politician, sometimes I get irritated by that. So I wouldn't elaborate, but in our profession, like I said, there are a lot of occupational hazards.
Yes, definitely.
Sometimes politicians are the creators of such issues, but sometimes we also try to resolve. So for instance, what you are doing right now, you're trying to have a conversation with individuals who would have opinions on various aspects of their life and issues. However, for me, as a legislator and as a servant of the people, we want to take any issue head on so that we are able to break it down and resolve it. We are able to bring new ideas or transform those issues into something good for the society. So we are constantly engaged with one issue or the other. with one issue or the other, and that is very important for us because we want to bring solutions to problems that affect us. And a lot of time we see and we understand that unless we take the people along, it's difficult for us to implement good policies.
Right.
But the problem is, taking the people along is a challenge. And Nagaland is developing only at the speed of people's understanding of issues. So that speed cannot be called speed also. It's a very slow process.
Right.
It's a very slow process. You know, like on women reservation, when you have any affirmative action policy anywhere in the world, you leave your sense of entitlement. You are saying, okay, there is some disparity in the development of a region or of a people or of a community or a section of certain group, and in order to bring them up to par, there is an attempt to bring in an affirmative action policy. If people don't understand that and they want this affirmative action policy to be there forever, then there is some issue. Some issue in the development of a society or a government.
Right.
It should be debated, but it should be fair. It should be fair to everyone. So sometimes we propose that this is required, maybe for a 15 years period, 30 years period.
Right.
But disparity cannot be looked at from that angle alone. Disparity has to be looked at from various other privileges that certain districts get over the other. So this is an issue which I sometimes think about. And when we are discussing, there are some opinions from certain sections of people which are regressive. And in one meeting, I was compelled to say, I will not mention the issue, that if you want to live in the past, please go ahead. A society and a culture are tied to each other. It should be dynamic. It should evolve according to changing circumstances. If it does not, then how can our society be at par with the world? Our youth think like Americans. Our youth think that, we should have the kind of privileges they have. How did they become a developed country in the first place? What are the policies that we need to address in order for every section of our society to benefit equally? So unless we achieve that, Nagaland will not grow. And that is the challenge our generations have. We cannot just blame everybody and anybody for our ills. So the first challenge is, what can you do yourself for your society, for your people, for your village? When people ask me that, we need change, we need a revolution. You just need to do some simple things. Like for instance, your school in your village. You have to see the teacher-student population ratio. If it is good enough, then you'll have to ensure that there are no proxy teachers.
Right.
You see, you should start from your home. And you can't expect the world to come and change your state. You have to start yourself in your village.
You have to be part of the solution. You can't just be complaining. Yes.
I feel that it is not just buildings and infrastructure alone. Of course, we need roads. And roads are very important. The road to development begins with the development of roads.
Correct.
And we are seeing a lot of changes in that sector, and it's positive. I think Prime Minister Modi's greatest achievement has been that he has been able to build roads at every nook and corner of the country at a faster pace in a day than any other government in the past. So that's one of the issues that are solved at the policy level from the center. So if the policy is good, it impacts people at the ground. So down the last mile, what are the policies that we can come up with which will ensure that somebody in the cornermost part of Nagaland receives the same benefit at the same time as the other fellow from KOHIMA or DIMAPUR.
Right.
So these are the challenges we have, Anyway, if we go discussing that,
That'll go on for a long time.
that'll go on for a long time, yeah.
But sir, just before we start wrapping up, a poet or a politician, who are you first?
No one has asked me that. I usually quote Bob Dylan. It's the easy way out. He's the only musician who's got a Nobel Prize for literature. And the only politician who got a Nobel Prize for literature is Winston Churchill. So this is a very complex question. But to me, in my thinking, I'm not confused about both. Like Bob Dylan says, I'm a poet first and a musician second. So in my mind, I'm a writer first. And I want to create. The creative and aesthetic urge in my being is strong, and it voices out strongly in all aspects of my life. However, the fact that I've already mentioned, that as a poet, as a writer, if you are not sensitive to the realities of your people, then you are not really a poet or a writer.
Right.
You're just indulging in the arts because it's a fashion. It's just that you want to be called a
writer
poet
or a poet. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I am really, very clear that my politics is as a consequence of my reading and writing. So I cannot be a politician
if you're not a poet first.
Or a writer.
A writer, okay.
So it's as a consequence of my writing and poetry. Interest in poems, that the politics emerges.
Okay. And that's very well put, as expected.
So there's no conflict. You see, it's just as a consequence.
Right.
Because you're sensitive to the issues of people, the thoughts, emotions of people, but you're also caring. So I care for my Nagaland. I love Nagaland. I want it to grow. I want it to be different from the Nagaland of today.
Right.
And I want to be given the opportunity to actually bring about that difference. So in whatever I do, I want to do it sincerely and for the good of our people. So as a sensitive person and a writer, you would naturally want to do things which will help and enable our people to grow.
Right.
So I think, and I believe that it's a little crude, but the saying goes that politics is the art of the possible. So in politics, I see a lot of possibility for our people to grow.
Right. And I love that you shared it like that. That comes down to our conclusion. Before we conclude, though, there's one poem that I'd like to just ask for you to sort of again, it's not exactly a breakdown, but it's right here in the beginning. Labor for Britain. You want to go ahead and read it? Labor for Britain. And then we'll just...
Let me read it.
Yes, we'll briefly this.
Since this is the last part.
Yes.
A hardy farmer on a sunny day, beads of sweat making a bountiful harvest. Merrymaking is fermenting rice in a braided man disrobing loincloth, tendons loosening, having run from conscription. A warrior with 100 heads, glorified barbarian, decorated gladiator. No man dare say his name wrong, was the first to explode, his nerves seething in all expeditions. Virile, now what with shadowy robes contain, now a labor for Britain.
This is a very beautiful poem, this one.
This is a painful one for me.
It is.
It is for the Nagas, the entire experience with both the First and Second World War with colonization.
Yes.
If you look at our history, every village will have a warrior whose courage and valor is known across their village towards the neighboring villages.
Right.
And the Naga warrior is privileged accordingly. These are the standards of who a courageous, strong warrior is. And we used to glorify them. But we are farmers as well. And we also go and tend to our fields. So we had a complete system within a village.
Right.
That's a village republic.
Our own republic.
So when the World War came and when we were colonized, we had to send our farmers, our warriors
Right.
as labor
Mm.
for the British Empire.
Correct. The thing why I connected with this very strongly is because a thought that I have very often is I'm very philosophical, so just a thought that I have very often is that if foreign forces hadn't intervened in our culture, our people, where would we have been as Nagas if American missionaries didn't come or the British didn't invade or whatever it may be? How would we have grown as uninterfered? Like if it was no intervention from the foreign forces. And it's just something that I ponder upon. Like we've seen since we're very similar to them, like Japanese with their rich culture of thousands of years and how they've evolved. They didn't get there suddenly. Also, they took time. The architecture there. So just thought that I was thinking about where would we have been? How would have our houses been if we had more time to evolve independently before the intervention of outside forces?
I mean, to be very honest, to me, I think that it's a question I wouldn't want to ask. So I'm at peace with that. Because if you look at the history of the world and history of any civilization,
Right.
you would know the reasons why they developed, the reasons why civilizations and empires fell, and why it grew. There's so many factors: religion, powerful army. But usually, there is a very interesting point made by a political anthropologist called James Scott. In his book called The Art of Not Being Governed. He talks about why people took to the hills and started and practiced the slash and burn Zoom cultivation, and why people who lived in the plains tended to the fields and the valleys and had a sedentary agricultural system. So when you have surplus economy, and for any kingdom, you tend to patronize art because you have the wealth,
Right.
and also you have as a ambitious king or emperor, you want to conquer. So it's a very natural cycle of history. What if in history? What if is a big question that we would spend hours and hours thinking.
But I am one who likes
So
to think.
the general response which I gave you that I'm at peace with that is because it happened.
Yes.
It happened, and today we are in a different situation.
Right.
Post 1947, we've been part of the Indian subcontinent.
Right. Right.
I mean, the nation.
Nation itself.
And today, in spite of the challenges we have as a people, I think the question that you're raising is something which was bound to happen, but it was a matter of policy. The questions that I would like to ask are particular, not just general, because I think you have more time to think about those things. So I would think of why the Britishers allowed the American missionaries to come to this part of the world. Why are Nagas, being given to the American missionaries? Why didn't they send the Presbyterians to us? So those are questions of policy they took, which historians will dwell into. But personally, all these questions are questions which individually you will ask, but historians will have dealt with it. The whys and wherefores, I think we should be at peace with that.
For better or for worse, we are here where we are. And
But when you ask somebody, when you say that you like this poem, I mean, precisely that's what I wanted to do. I wanted, our Nagas to sort of, when some non-Nagas are asking us, about our history, about our culture, I wanted to write a book which I can give to a non-Naga and say, okay, read this first, and then we will discuss.
Right.
Because it covers every aspect of who we met, who we encountered as a people, what we were, both in terms of civilizational encounters, And all the transformations that happened has been documented in the form of small poems that I wrote in this book. So it's like, I've narrated earlier. If I meet somebody who's not a Naga and who wants to know about our culture, usually we would recommend a set of books on the Nagas. But I want to also give them a set of poems which will encourage them to think beyond their own set of questions.
Right.
So this is something which, I wanted to present them as representative of who we are, what we were.
In a very, very creative format. And makes people think instead of just the factual, this happened then, this happened then. Right? It's beautiful. If you would like to just share with us where Slingstones is a bestseller, if I'm not mistaken.
If we are to define its market strength and also status, so because before the announcement of a book, if it goes for a reprint, number one, and then if it has already gone for 3 reprints, then it's considered a bestseller.
Okay. So congratulations on that. Where are these available? And besides the local bookstores?
So the main easiest access to this book is Amazon.
Okay.
Then you just have to type the name. Then in the bookstores across the country, and people, the sales are higher in Delhi. And in Nagaland, I think in KOHIMA, DIMAPUR, and certain
pockets here and
there, certain bookshops are selling it. So in Manipur, Assam, you'll find this book.
Right.
But generally, the sales have been high on Amazon as well.
So were you surprised with how well this has been doing so far, or?
I was genuinely surprised.
Okay.
Because when you write, I usually write for myself.
Yeah.
And I would want my grandkids to read it and say that, okay, my grandfather wrote that book, and I can identify with that. So it's not necessarily for the market, but since any publishing firm would want to sell their books, I was pleasantly surprised that it is doing well, and I hope it will do well in the days to come as well. So I'm happy. Contented.
Yeah, it is doing well. I hope it keeps doing well too. And to wrap up today's conversation, which I thoroughly enjoyed, I just want to end with this question, which is, where does the future lie for you? Whether it be still continuing as a poet, an author, as a politician, or is there some dreams that you're harboring? Could we see you in your new avatar in 10 years, 15 years? If you can share with us some of your secrets or what you think.
So, Asale, it's a very good question. However, I'm constrained to not share.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. I've already said that, as a poet and a writer, I can't stop being a politician. Because to me, politics means serving people. To me, politics means ensuring that right policies are in place, so that our systems are in place.
Right.
So the high rate of unemployment, the high ratio of government employees per population in Nagaland state, all these are challenges. And the creation of avenues for our entrepreneurs to grow and thrive is something we are looking at. And then also to finally, once we have an ecosystem where people's mentality, mindset will be impacted by that system,
right?
So that the dependence of people on the government, dependence of our educated people on their political leaders, that should change. Then we will have a politics which is beautiful, a politics based on issues. A politics based on just debates on development,
Definitely what we need.
Yeah. So we look up to American society, Western society. We talk a lot about them, and we always compare ourselves. And when we hear anybody give a speech in any union function, it's all about that. But I feel that the greatest challenge is to ensure that the right policies are in place so that generations to come will benefit from it. Not just our generation,
Right.
not just my family, my village. No. You know, I think that has to change. We have to come out of that tribal narcissism, you know,
Yes.
the limitation of it, you know. I think as Christians, we should also every night question our conscience, whether what we are doing is right. Unless we accept that challenge, you know, even if everyone is a church-going member, I think there is a lot of problem. And so ultimately, my challenge is that. So I will continue as a politician because I'm a writer and a poet.
Okay, that's very well put. To end, we have this small segment called the message or the messages. Just 3 brief messages. I'll just give you a chance to give the messages to 1 family, 2 friends, and 3 to the Nagas in general. So you can just take a moment to just think of a few things you want to say to your family, to friends, and to the Nagas in general. And we'll wrap up with that.
Let me begin with the family.
Okay.
Usually, I was told that when you give opportunity to your guests to send a message to your family, they're usually grateful. They also have some snippets of, you know, advices. But I was thinking that every family is supportive of their children or, you know, parents or any individual member of the family.
Correct.
Is very supportive. And family unit is very important to, and support is also very important to every individual. So that being said, I would only say, you know, to the family that unless we are each a contributing member of the society, and unless we all stand on our own feet and support not just the family but the society we live in, I think we will not derive a meaningful life from, you know, the joy of our association. So it goes beyond family. It is about every relation we have, you know, because sometimes I remember Leo Tolstoy, who said that the most important person in the world is always the one who's sitting next to you. And sometimes a lot of sacrifice and selflessness is seen in any member of the family. I think I appreciate, and I think that should be the priority. Because in my constituency, I am very clear. Those who are for the growth of our constituency are part of my family. Those who are against the growth of the constituency are not part of my family.
As simple as that.
As simple as that. And so I want to generalize that message. And to my friends who are always supportive, who has always, you know, been very honest and very clear in terms of what they expect of me. And in my journey, I have been, you know, able to reach to this stage in politics because of friends who believe in me and who believe that we are a team and we can do things together. So I want to request them to continue believing in that, that this is bigger than all of us put together, that we are doing something which will be meaningful, which will have a historical impact, because we are sincere and we love our people and we are doing things which is, as I have said, which is bigger than all of us put together. And what was the last one?
The to our people, the Nagas in general.
Nagas in general.
You'll be very used to this being a politician, but just a personal message, but to everyone in general, Nagas.
Nagas in general. You really want me to say that?
Just a short.
There are so many things I want to say, actually to our people. And especially to your audience who would represent a section of our people.
Right.
I want to say that we have come this far. Let us focus on the future. Let us focus on living together as a people. Let us look at the good of each other, of every community, and let us build our society on the basis of that belief in each other. And let us not compete for the sake of competing. Let us not put down one tribe or the other because God has blessed you differently. But I think the Nagas can only go far if we all go together. That is my ultimate message.
Beautiful message. We're at the end of the podcast. Once again, sir, before I can't sign off before thanking you, and our podcast is besides talking about issues and topics which is necessary, it's all about having a positive vibe. We try and bring positivity out of everything we can, and we like to thank and appreciate people right here and now, and not only after they're gone. Give them the flowers while they're still alive. So thank you so much for being a leader that we are happy to look up to. In all honesty, in a state like ours, leaders unfortunately are not many to pick from, and the few that we have, we're very happy about, and you're one of them in my opinion. So thank you for taking the time out. Thank you for blessing us with your presence, and that's a wrap from us.
Thank you for your kind words and for having me in your show. Thank you.
Hey.